To many, Hawaii Creole English is what they grew up speaking. To others, it can be a strange, difficult to decipher language. Hawaii Creole English, or Pidgin as it is commonly called, is spoken by roughly 600,000 people in the state of Hawaii. Pidgin or Pidgin English was not originally recognized as a language, but rather a broken English. However, various forms of Pidgin, such as Pacific Pidgin English, West African Pidgin English, and Chinese Pidgin English all have their own grammatical rules.
On the surface, you think you kind of think the Pidgin decreasing, but I think what happened is changing form. So here it sounds more like English, but if you look at it carefully, you have to look at it really carefully. It's really subtle. There's a difference, I think, there, between the Pidgin and English. I mean, in terms of how it's used here, particularly in Honolulu. So we call that the acolactal form, so the real lighter Pidgin stuff, right? It almost sounds like English, but it has differences. But on the neighbor islands, I think it's still full on, really strong.
Hawaii Pidgin began on plantations in the early 1800s. At first, Native Hawaiians were the only laborers in the fields. Bringing in immigrant workers was due to increasing pressure from the Native Hawaiian laborers who wanted more pay for their back-breaking 10 to 12-hour shifts. The Big Five that ran most commercial operations in the islands were Alexander and Baldwin, American Factors, Castle and Cook, C. Brewer and Company, and Theo H. Davies Company. Laborers from China and Portugal brought their culture and language to the plantations. In the beginning, the primary languages spoken were Hawaiian and English, then Portuguese and Cantonese. By the 1900s, Okinawan, Filipino, Puerto Rican, and Korean immigrants arrived to work on the plantations. Although each ethnic group had their own living area or camps on the plantations, Pidgin developed as a need for members of the plantation workforce to communicate with one another.
Because they don't know each other's language, they use a common language, the language of the plantation, so the language of the owners, the plantation owners, the managers, whatever, and then they use that language to communicate with each other. Except that the language is reduced by the speakers. So in other words, let's say the people working on a plantation will be given orders and stuff, and then the English that was used here was kind of reduced, was simplified, and they would use that. And then because they're hearing this language while working, they're not getting everything either. So it's kind of filtered that way. And then because their first languages were not English, right? So they were either can be Cantonese or Portuguese or Japanese, whatever. It gets filtered through that language too. So a lot of features from those languages come up in what they were saying, in how they were communicating. And that's just the beginning of Pidgin.
Although Hawaiian had remained the primary language in the islands during the establishment of plantations, the social and political power had already shifted to non-natives, such as British and American businessmen and entrepreneurs. And with the move from Hawaiian to English becoming the dominant language in the islands, Pidgin English began to emerge.
They brought people in from different places so that they partly purposely they would bring them in from different places so that they don't organize, they can communicate with each other.
The plantation owners would designate one of the workers to act as a liaison between them and their laborers. Oftentimes, they would select multiple people for this position from the same ethnicity and would give them special standing, which included the authority to manage their peers on horseback. These overseers were called Luna and were often of Portuguese descent. This stratification, as well as different pay among different ethnic groups, caused tension among the Hawaiians, Portuguese, Japanese, Chinese, Filipinos, Okinawans, Koreans, and Puerto Ricans, and prevented the group from forming a union to demand better wages and better working conditions. Pidgin began to grow outside of the plantations once these workers started having children who grew up learning Pidgin as their first or second language. Pidgin is referred to as such when it is used in situational environments, like trying to communicate among people who speak different languages. However, if the Pidgin becomes a first language of communication, it becomes a Creole. Within 4 generations, Hawaii Pidgin was no longer classified as a Pidgin, but as a Creole.
Over time, you use the same patterns over and over and over again, and then that amounts to becoming a grammar. And so things start to get more stable. Then you have a Pidgin, a true Pidgin originating. Several generations later, it appears the speakers using the language as their first language. Then it's called a Creole. So there's a technical difference between a Pidgin and a Creole. But generally, the popular name for all of it is just Pidgin.
Despite attempts to prevent its growth, Pidgin still remains a strong presence in Hawaii due to its close association with local culture. Many oppose Pidgin because they claim that it is not a true language and that learning proper English is more valuable in today's society.
I was born and raised in Honolulu. More specifically, I grew up on Aliva Heights. And I grew up speaking Pidgin. And when I was about 8 years old, I became aware of the fact that I was speaking Pidgin, not standard English. So at that point, I stopped saying Haole. I started to say Caucasian, and I tried to speak proper English, but of my own choice, not because of my parents' pressure. Also, I was involved with the Hawaii Pidgin Bible Translation Project. So, because I got involved with the Pidgin Translation Project, I became aware of Pidgin as a language by itself, and it also helped me to connect with who I was. It's like when I read the Bible in standard English, I can kind of identify with it on the mind level, but when I heard the Bible in Pidgin, it kind of hit me on the heart level. So that's why I got involved not only with the Pidgin Translation Project, but also with the Pidgin Crew, because for me, it kind of helped me to connect with my local roots, my local identity. English is the dominant language of the USA, but Pidgin is unique to Hawaii. So for me, to speak Pidgin is to maintain, to preserve, to perpetuate Hawaii's unique local culture. So I think it's really important to encourage it, to promote it.
There are some terms like Pukatru, so like going through something like Pukatru, or Pauple, things like that. They're kind of more idiomatic, so they're not Pau play. It doesn't mean you finish playing, right? It has a totally different kind of meaning. I don't know how to explain it. Pau play. Oh, that's it. It's not like that's it. If you hire the guy or Pau play, he gonna eat everything in the restaurant or something like that. If you hire him as a waiter, he gonna eat everything in the restaurant. If you hire him as a cook, Pau play, he gonna eat everything. So that's it, kind of meaning. Things like that, so no joke. It has a very subtle, different kinds of meaning. People hear it as English, but it doesn't have the same meaning yet. So, no, it's not. I don't think it's decreasing. It's just changing.
Others claim that it is necessary to promote the use of Pidgin amongst people in Hawaii today because it has become synonymous with what many perceive as the true voice of Hawaii.